I have a really easy presentation today. What I want to do first is just to set the stage. So why is it that we put these companies together? And what was the market need? And then what can you expect, right? Many of you have been customers for a long time. So just a real quick show of hands, how many of you are Heritage, Curion, Core Security, Damballa customers? Just a quick show of hands. Great. And then do we have any SecureAuth customers as well? Okay, small group of those as well. So welcome, and again, thank you for your time. So as we look at why we put these companies together, there's a book in the market called Play Bigger. Have any of you read it? Okay, a couple people in the room. Great book. And it's a book that talks about not only technology companies like Checkpoint or Salesforce, or a combination technology consumer company like Uber, or other consumer companies like Whole Foods or Starbucks. But it's a book that tells the story about why categories get created and why there are these paradigm shifts that take us a step forward. And part of the thesis for putting these two companies together is rooted in the story told in Play Bigger. And a central theme of the book, Play Bigger, is that how each of these companies moved us forward. Whoever would have thought that they would be getting in a stranger's car, right, and taking a ride somewhere, doing ride sharing, and not having to deal with a taxi cab. One of the attendees at the conference yesterday told me they got out of their taxi cab. They now figured out that they take more Ubers than taxis, because they got out and the guy said, hold on a second, you have to pay me, right? Because with Uber, you just get out, that's all taken care of. So the idea behind Play Bigger is what is the opportunity, or what needs to change to make something better? And part of the reason we put these two companies together is we see this opportunity that identity needs to be thought of in a security context. So many of you may find some of the concepts in the book useful as well. We had a meeting of about 8 or 10 CISOs yesterday, and an ongoing challenge for all of us is how do we help our companies understand the importance of identity and the importance of security, right, in moving the business forward? So we put these two companies together because we believe that identity is necessary to security. Well, why is it necessary? Well, the stakes are getting larger. Again, at this CISO event yesterday, we asked each of these CISOs to say, what's top of mind for you, sitting in your seat as a CISO? What's coming from the board of directors? And for all of them, there are a lot of different commonalities. Many of them talked about silos. Many of them talked about integration of solutions, challenges, and making the business case and the context for the business. But all of them talked about, from the board of director level down, this need not to become a headline, this need not to get breached, or if a breach happens, to be able to quickly detect it and do something about it. And then also had a concern about rogue employer insider threat. So why does identity need to be part of security? Well, the stakes have gone up, right? And if you think about the stakes of a breach or of ransomware in healthcare, for example, they're real, there's their lives on the line, right? For IoT, as we're going to go to self-driving cars, or as different parts of the airplane, are parts that can be taken over. Stakes are real, so we have to get better at this equation, and we have to take a step forward as an industry. So why have the stakes gone up? Well, it's not for lack of investment. So 80 billion moving to 90 billion in 2018. We're investing a lot, right? But for some reason, the number of breaches continue to be high. 40% 14 to 15, 40% 15 to 16. Wouldn't we all expect that those numbers would go down? What is it that we need to change in our approach to help affect those numbers for the benefit of our companies and our customers and our constituents? Well, part of what we think is wrong in the industry is that you've all seen the Verizon data breach report. That data breach report says that credentials are at the center. There's a root cause that most oftentimes involves credentials. I think the report last year said 81% of all breaches have some sort of root cause in the misuse of a credential. The year before that, I think it was in the 60%. So that statistic is going in the opposite direction, right? And the 20 years of experience we have as identity and security practitioners, second factor has been around forever, right? It's been around for 20 years. Part of the challenge for us is that when we go to the business and we say, we need to be more secure, but there's this balance between security and usability, the businesses will hold on a second. And over 20 years, only 56% of all assets are covered by more than username and password. Multi-factor has been around for 10 years. SecureAuth Corporation, a little tidbit of history, used to be called Multi-Factor Corporation. It was one of the first to do multi-factor authentication. Game-changing 10 years ago, right? But that was 10 years ago, right? So the old way, this 20-year-old approach, we think needs to change. It's another reason we put these companies together. And then when you look at our ability to detect if a bad guy's in the network, well, we've improved that. But all of us would agree we've got a long way to go to improve that as well. It's another reason that we put these companies together. So when you look at the attack lifecycle, there's plenty of technology that's being put to work in the attack lifecycle. As practitioners, you guys are all familiar with these. Part of the problem is that technology is siloed. Part of the problem is those technologies don't easily talk to one another, right? Part of the problem is identity needs to be considered at each stage, right? And then I would also challenge all of us to think, as we look at each part of the attack lifecycle, we can do better training, right? And teach people not to click through on things so that their credentials don't get stolen. Or maybe we should consider a different approach. Maybe we shouldn't be using credentials anymore. Are there different ways to solve that problem? So with the 80 going to $90 billion of investment in security and identity technologies, with this attack lifecycle, our ability to detect and respond to a breach, all of those investments, if you have a perfectly good set of credentials, you walk through the front door and you hide in plain sight. We know this to be true, and we think that we can do better as a company and as an industry. So that's easy. You know, in your seats, you say, okay, let me go out and take a look, right? And in cybersecurity, I think the numbers are there are at least 2,000 companies. There are lots of different categories. A lot of what I hear as I visit customers and talk to you about what you need is, gosh, you all sound the same, right? So this is complicated. Your jobs are complicated, and it's hard to figure out which things first. What holes do you plug, or what actions do you take? So how can industry analysts help? I'm sure all of you use different firms for different reasons. IDC has some research that says they think that identity needs to change. It needs to be more security conscious. And if you think about it, this idea of the network being more than the perimeter, this has been out there for quite some time, right? Attackers are attacking our identities, they're attacking our devices, et cetera. The combined company, SecureAuth and Core, we're protecting over 50 million identities, and we're monitoring over 750 million devices. That's substantial. They also cite the Verizon data breach report, understand from conversations with you and the research that they do that there's an elephant in the room, and it's that we're not doing a good job preventing against the misuse of a credential in the ways that we're solving the problem today. Some of it's just coverage. Some of it's traditional thinking around protecting remote users, right, that are coming in, but not protecting users who are on the network, right, or third parties or consumers that are using a portal. Right? Some of it's conventional thinking, but they would say root cause is also rooted in the misuse of a credential. The Heritage Curion customers, you know, we obviously help you determine who has access to what, provisioning those users and deprovisioning those users. SecureAuth was a company that does MFA, Adaptive Auth, SSO, but is the leader in adaptive access. So there's a lot of good synergy that we get by bringing these companies together. Users continue to rebel against these traditional approaches. So no matter how simple your second factor, the question is, why bother a user unless there's risk? Why force a user to do anything if there's no risk? Right? And then finally, how do you determine risk? big data, machine learning, the machine learning and AI that comes from Dembala and our Network Insight product, the ability to correlate that information against known vulnerabilities. Now bringing identity into that picture and the machine learning that we have happening on the SecureAuth platform. We're going to have some presentations about where we think that's going from an identity and security perspective by Stephen Newman and Keith Graham, both members of our executive team. So IDC believes that identity and security need to be coming together. Forrester has a lot of good research on the topic as well, and Joe Blankenship's going to be talking a bit about security analytics and orchestration. But this particular study says, well, let me just ask a question. How many of you in the room are identity people? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you are security people? Okay, well, Forrester says that you security folks, when you're looking at anticipating an attack, you're looking at threats and vulnerabilities, right? You're not oftentimes looking at identity. Identity folks, Forrester says you're looking at business enablement. Of course you are, right? That's where identity and access management started. It's about enabling the business. Forrester says you guys need to be working more closely together. We agree, and part of the story of Core Security and SecureAuth coming together is the intersection of those capabilities. IDC goes a bit further. They say we shouldn't be using a password. Everyone hates passwords. Why are we using them? They're root cause. No one likes changing them. No one likes dealing with them. They also say that this approach of a second factor or of MFA, it's old. So why bother the user unless you have to bother the user? And then finally, you're going to hear not only from Brian Krebs, but also from Joe Blankenship and our experts, that these silos were another common theme. We hear it when we come visit with customers. We heard it from a small gathering of CISOs yesterday. Fixing this siloed problem and being able to rationalize what's happening across all of these data sets, it's a challenge for all of us today. Some are better than others. There's steps in that process. There's a lot of technology. It's not easy. But getting to what you prioritize and how you act without disrupting the business, we think, and agree with some of these analysts, that that's a whole new category in and of itself, and it's another reason that we brought these companies together. So what does this mean in practice? This is a use case of a financial services company. They help businesses and consumers file their tax returns. And this is a case where we take something that's very traditionally in the SOC, threat services. It's one piece of the adaptive access that SecureAuth brings to the table. It's one of 11 or 12 risk layers that we analyze pre-authentication before we show somebody a login screen. And it takes a couple of pieces. Where is this person coming from? Not necessarily geolocation or geovelocity, while it's part of the mix. It is this person coming from a location that's suspicious, a Tor browser or an anonymous proxy? Are they coming from an IP address that's known to be malicious? And we put that information not in the SOC, where you can look at it post, but before the authentication, along with other risk layers, with the goal being to identify, is that user who they say they are, and is there any risk that this user getting access to what they need? This use case started, it was a simple SSO, please improve my user experience use case, and became that plus a security use case. And you can see the 4 weeks of data here. It's interesting to watch the trends. This company, they've got a lot of activity the 4 weeks before you file your taxes. There are a lot of people that are interested in that data, rediverting funds, et cetera. 486 issues per day, or I'm sorry, yeah, per day that we're seeing pre-authentication, where they can take an action to not let that person have access or that entity have access. So what's the flip side of that? Well, why bother users if you don't have to? So even as Keith's going to share some data across lots of authentications we do within our network of customers at SecureAuth, and this was a subset looking at over 171 million authentications where, yeah, this really is about finding those needles in a haystack and taking an action on that. It's not about disrupting business. It's not about making users do something they don't want to do. It's about making users prove they are who they say they are when there's risk. So the flip side of adaptive is that you obviously step people up when there's risk, but the key to the equation is you don't bother users. You can have better security and better usability. That's different today than saying, I'm going to ask a user to do something every single time they log in, regardless. So here we are today. We had the opportunity to accelerate the vision for bringing more of identity and access together with security. SecureAuth and Core Security are now a top 5% in terms of revenue, size, scale, our ability to serve you. We're serving over 1,500 customers across industry verticals. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we're protecting over 50 million identities and monitoring over 750 million devices. The amount of value that we can deliver to you continues to get even more interesting, not just in terms of point solutions, but how machine learning and AI can be applied across the entire network to better identify threats that may be common not only to a company, but to a vertical or to all of us collectively. The companies have very similar heritages, and we had a common vision, so it was easy to take advantage of this opportunity. The core security side had its roots in identity, started with Kurion. And the sponsor, the financial sponsor, had the same vision, that identity and security needed to come together, and started adding different capabilities. The ability to have, again, machine learning and network insight, through the Damballa capability, to have the world's best penetration testing tool in core security, to be adding more security to the identity portfolio in Secure Reset. And we had a very similar parallel path at SecureAuth. We too had our roots in identity. Our employees, the two founders, were two ex-Integrity guys who wanted to do identity better. They wanted to make it easier. They thought the old way needed to be improved. And we have a lot of employees that come out of Ping or Quest, Symantec, traditional identity companies. About 3 years ago, our financial sponsor also had a vision, right, for identity and security coming together to be able to improve the equation for all of us. And we hired our CTO and a whole team of people from Mandiant and FireEye, the team that developed the Mirror endpoint product, the team that had discovered some of the most public breaches over the last bunch of years that are very well known. So we, about 3 years ago, took a turn from being a pure identity company to a security company focused on preventing the misuse of the credential. So what can you expect? Well, very simply, more solutions. So, for the folks on the Heritage Core side, you guys can now take advantage of SecureAuth for adaptive access control in front of SSO. We solve those problems for B2E use cases. We solve those problems for consumer identity and access management situations. We solve those problems for third-party risk situations. For SecureAuth customers, you can now bring the power of what we have in Heritage Core, the governance capabilities, the network capabilities, the vulnerability capabilities. So very simply, more solutions. We have a world-class engineering organization. So we're going to put the pedal to the metal on innovation. We have greater than 140 people in our combined engineering organizations. The roadmaps, this is a question that I've had since we made our announcement. What does this mean to the product that I purchased? That's not affected. We have the ability to deliver and continue to innovate on the products that you've selected while we build for the future and bring identity and security together. And then finally, the focus on making you successful. These projects at times are not easy. We've got greater than 100 people in our combined customer success organizations. We have a network of expert partners, many of whom are here today. And then we also have the ability to learn. not only online through SecureAuth University, but in person. And as of today, I'm also announcing taking opportunities like these conferences. Each company had its own user groups, and we're bringing all of those together into Connect. This is the first Connect user group event with the big conference, and we're going to do a series of these events where we learn from each other. As we're doing today, we bring in industry experts on topics. We talk about roadmaps, get your input, and make sure we're delivering value for all of you. So that's new as of today. For the Heritage Core customers, one of the things we did at SecureAuth, we integrate to hundreds of different capabilities on the market. The combined companies share a philosophy that we want to fit to your environment. You've made lots of investments in existing capabilities. We're not a rip and replace company. We want you to get more value out of the investments that you made, so we're going to continue to invest in standards, integrations, et cetera. We did something at SecureAuth a couple years ago where we said for the attack lifecycle, there isn't one company that solves that whole problem. So we started to do more API-level based integrations with specific companies at each point in the attack lifecycle to solve that use case, very important use case problem. We called it the Connected Security Alliance. We're a charter member of Optiv's Identity-Defined Security Alliance, so we partner with them and partner with competitors and complementary solutions alike. We want to help better protect your organization, better enable your organization, so it's not one size fits all. We're going to continue to invest in integrations and making the ecosystem work. And then finally, we want you to see more value. So, as a thank you to everybody, as of the conference, we're going to, for the first 25 customers that want us to help with a risk awareness workshop, sit down with you, help you define your attack surfaces, help define a plan that may help you get better at protecting and detecting and acting upon those. For customers that want to take a step forward on the SecureAuth side and have needs on the penetration testing side or a network insight side, we're going to offer deep discounts there to help you get started. And then we're also, this bucket on the right, for core customers that have projects around, a lot of companies are replacing RSA, or they're going beyond remote access and enabling adaptive authentication across their employee base, or they're enabling adaptive access for third parties or for their consumer portals. Stephen's going to talk about how we've already begun the integration of these products, and at our detect level of service, how we're already bringing together some of the most interesting capabilities around network, vulnerability, insight, and identity very soon here in the future. So we're going to offer the ability to get started there as a thank you to all of you. So going back to where I started, we put these companies together because we don't think the siloed approach works. Right? Today in the SOC, it's a challenge, right? You're looking at network and vulnerability and endpoint threats many times in different silos. In most cases, that's devoid of identity information. We think there's plenty of information out there that shows the ability to bring these things together through one pane of glass to understand what are the most relevant risks so that you can take an action is where the industry needs to go. And while we're happy to solve your use cases, your point use cases around penetration testing or identifying network insights or vulnerabilities, implementing a second factor if that's what you want to do, or MFA, or governance, we think this line is the play bigger line. We think where the industry is going to make a real difference. While that traditional approach makes a difference, we think being able to take a step in the direction of adaptive authentication, the ability to not only have greater security but better usability, the ability to look at what's happening with credentials, along with what's happening with an endpoint that may be infected, with what's happening where an attack path for an attacker may be identified. Putting those things together, getting earlier detection, and then being able to take an action at the identity layer, we think that's what's going to make the most difference in affecting these statistics that I shared with you earlier. We think we're one of the few companies that can cover the depth and breadth of not only the tactical use cases, but where the industry is going. So on behalf of the entire team at Core Security and SecureAuth, I want to thank you all for being customers. I look forward to learning from each of you. I trust you're going to get a lot of value out of the sessions, the customer sessions, and our analyst sessions, and from each other this afternoon. We look forward to serving you well, and we look forward to seeing you at your locations and in the field as well.